Hi, this is Joey with The Grove, and welcome to Fresh for The Grove. I've got a really important question for you today, artists, and I think it's really going to go right to your heart. So I'm going to ask you this question. Are you listening to the Creative Shitty Committee? And you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what that committee looks like in your brain. So we're going to be talking for the next 10 or 15 minutes about what's involved with listening to the Creative Shitty Committee and how that influences our life, how our thinking really impacts our art, our life, our faith, and it's really important to get a handle on this subject because how we think about our thoughts, how we think about our art, what we're creating, the challenges that we're facing, what you tell yourself in your thoughts really, really matters. I'm going to go into extensive detail here. So join me as we talk about what it's like listening to the Shitty Committee in our lives. If you are listening to the replay, I want to invite you to, if you find this helpful, go ahead and share it with someone else. We really want to help artists cultivate their spiritual life and their creative work. We want to give good tools. That's what we're about here at The Grove. So if you do have a comment or question, please post it. If you're just joining in now, I'd love to hear from where you're coming from and get a conversation going today. So I'll start with a story. A few weeks ago, a very good friend of mine, his son has been going through a really difficult time. He's a teenager. He's really wrestling with a lot of problems. And they've been dealing with this for well over a year with my friend's family. And the son finally got some breakthroughs. And when his dad and him had a heart-to-heart, the son finally said to him, he said, "Dad, I realized that for so long I was listening to this shitty committee in my mind, and it was just impacting me, how I felt about myself, how I valued or didn't value myself, and it really helped me understand why I was going to drugs and alcohol to medicate what I felt about myself." Well, as my friend and I talked about it more, we really arrived at the simple premise that when we listen to this creative shitty committee in our mind, it really leads to stinking thinking. And I don't know where you're coming from, what kind of artist you are. Maybe you're listening to this, you're not even an artist at all, but the title got your attention. Your thoughts impact how you deal with your children, if you're married, how you deal with your spouse, your friends, your family members. And so much of our thinking and how we go about through the course of our days, it's pivotal to really consider how our thoughts impact our life. So I want to give you some practical examples. I'm going to tell you some stories, perhaps talk about my own life and why your thinking really matters. Let's look at it at the most basic level first. Let's talk about brain chemistry. And if you're just listening now, we're talking about how listening to the Creative Shitty Committee really impacts our art and our life. But when we think continual negative, toxic thoughts in our mind, what happens to our brain chemistry? We are actually developing neural pathways in our mind that is creating this superhighway of toxicity, and we are actually growing new neurons in our brains. If you've read anything about neuroplasticity, all the research that's come out in the past few years, how we can actually change our minds by what we think, it's amazing research going on. And one book that has been really helpful in my life is called Switch on Your Brain, and it's written by Dr. Carolyn Leaf. I'm going to go ahead and post that link later on so you can get that. But when we think negative, toxic thoughts like, I'm a terrible artist, nobody likes my work, what I'm writing is crap, the last performance I did was terrible, again, toxic flow, this black stew I liken it, in one of the books I wrote, it's called The Longing, Discovering the Deepest Truth of Who You Are. I compare it to, monkeys in the trees just hurling crap at us from the moment that we wake up. So that's one of my questions for you. When you wake up in the morning, what is your first thought of the day? When you go to bed at night, what are you thinking about? And if you look at the different areas of your life, you can begin to identify, hey, is there this shitty committee going on, these voices in my mind that are holding me back in my art, in my creativity, in what I'm making, in the dreams and desires that I have for my life. So let's look at a few examples of how you can identify if there's this type of toxicity in your thought life. First off, the shitty committee really happens at a young age. And so you can look back at your past relationships, particularly in your family. What beliefs, ideas, messages, voices ring like a regular pattern in your mind? Because at a young age, those neural networks, those grooves of the way we feel about ourselves, the things that we talk about, the way we look back on our life, the messages that we receive from perhaps a negative mom or dad, a coach who wasn't supportive, a teacher said one thing. When we look back at our past, we can really begin to identify what thoughts and beliefs am I living with today, and how do those negative thoughts impact how I think about myself and encounter people throughout the day. Next, look at your current relationships. How are people responding to you based upon what you say and what you do? Because by what I say and what I do, that's where my character is revealed. And so if you're just tuning in right now, we're talking about, are you listening to the Creative Shitty Committee in your mind? Maybe that title caught your attention. It's supposed to catch your attention because I don't know about you, but at the grove that we have down in San Diego, we've got 12 acres of organic lemons and avocados, and we put bird guano under our organic lemon trees to fertilize those trees so that they would be healthy and fruitful. That's the only good use of bird crap is to fertilize trees, okay? But when it's in our mind, it's terrible. And if you've been a creative and artist for any period of time, you know what it's like to wrestle with fear, doubt, anxiety as you work on your creative projects. So, going back to this issue of who are the current people in your life and how are they responding to you? Because our negative thinking really comes out in our demeanor, our character, what we say and what we do. And if we encounter someone in our day who's really negative, who's a jerk, who's cutting down other people, who's gossiping all the time, talking behind other backs, you can bet 100% that person has got a loud chorus of shitty thinking going on in its brain because it's coming out in our thoughts and actions. And so what I want to encourage you to do today is to think about, gosh, when I think about myself, when I think about others, how do I come to any problem, any conflict, any situation with the best possible mindset that I can come up with? And there's not magic science or voodoo to this. It's really a matter of training our brain so that we can really be in touch with our heart, because that's what it really comes down to, is getting to the heart and how do we live as whole people. So let me give you an example of someone that I was just speaking with the other day via email, and I'm going to just take this off down here. And this person had written me a note during email. It was an artist, and he was raising the question, I'm not even sure I can call myself an artist. I've been a graphic designer for a long time, but he went on to tell the story that he often got in trouble for daydreaming when he was a kid. And so in some ways, he was just squashed. These voices came in saying, hey, stop dreaming, do something practical, just do your work, just get it done. So these creative innate abilities inside of them were really pushed down by other people being negative. And in the artists that I've met with here at the Grove for many, many years, so many times I've heard that same story. I don't even know if I'm an artist. I don't even know that I can call myself an artist. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that if it's in your relationships that you see that there's this negativity coming out, the source of it in our minds. If you see other people and their character and demeanor, they're acting out in negative ways, it all begins with our thinking and how we approach other people. So let me give you some examples of shitty thinking and why this committee can really run rampant in our lives. First off, as I mentioned, the homes that we grew up in, maybe some key developmental experiences we had when we were perhaps teenagers. A source of pain is always the root of this shitty committee that we're listening to. It always goes back to a source of pain. So one practical step that you can take to identify, hey, where did these negative thoughts, beliefs, these patterns that I keep going back into my mind, go back and identify a source of pain, probably a wound in your life, and that negative committee in your brain is there usually because of an unresolved hurt, pain, or wound, and usually it's from a relationship, a great disappointment, a failure, and then we take that disappointment, that failure, and we make an agreement with it, and we begin to live a lie, and so we begin telling ourselves these lies and negative beliefs and ideas that simply aren't true. So first off, to really work through and develop a more positive mindset, we really have to identify the source of pain. Where is that thinking coming from? Next, when you, I don't know about you, but when I'm writing, sometimes I'll just hit a head wall. It's like I'm rock climbing and I've just got this massive mountain in front of me, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to get past it. Sometimes this negative, creative, shitty committee, when we hit these head walls, we just want to get out of pain because they're difficult, but that is the exact opposite of what we need to do. We need to hit that head wall and go for it and step into it, because creativity is hard work. That pain, that difficulty that we feel, it can mean that you're on the verge of a great breakthrough, but if you don't persevere and come at that head wall, that creative challenge, with the mindset that I can do this, I can really create something meaningful and substantial, that's key to breaking through to that head wall. So what is your attitude about conflict and challenges and problems? And if you see them as an opportunity for growth and learning, and hey, if I fail, well, heck, I'm just going to learn from it, and I'm just going to become a better person for it, then that's a wholly positive outcome. Now, another aspect, one thing to really rid yourself of this creative shitty committee that tells you that you're not a good writer, you're not a good actor, you're not a good filmmaker, you're not a good musician, you're never going to amount to anything, you'll never achieve your hopes and dreams. One way to eliminate that really quick is to stop comparing your art to someone else's. Okay, I'm a writer, you know that if you've listened to me for any part of time. I will probably never become a J.K. Rowling, and I'm okay with that. She's phenomenally successful. She's sold billions of dollars worth of Harry Potter books. But if you and I are always comparing ourselves, you've probably heard this before, but when we compare ourselves to someone else, we either put ourselves one up or one down. And when you're listening to the Creative Shitty Committee, you're usually putting yourself 2 or 3 steps down. And comparison has that innate ability about it to really create some toxic thinking. So don't compare your art to others. If anything, if you see a good writer or a good painter and you admire that work, man, learn from them. Contact that artist saying, hey, tell me how you did this. And so come at it from a learning posture versus like, oh, that person would never talk to me. I could never get close to them. You'd be amazed at how generous people can be with their time and energy. So don't compare yourselves with others. Recognize what are your unique talents and abilities that you're going to bring to the world. So one of the last things I want to share with you about listening to this creative shitty committee in our mind. One practice that has really helped me. Earlier on, if you're just listening in, I mentioned the book Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Carolyn Leaf. She holds the position is that whatever we wire into our brains, we can wire out. And a couple of years ago, I really began to identify that I had some persistent patterns of negative thinking that were really impacting my life, and they bled out in my relationships, my actions. So I got her book. It's called Switch on Your Brain. And one simple practice that she has you go through this process. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes every day, where you're focusing your thinking, you're identifying, gosh, what kind of toxic thoughts or stress or anxiety have I been dealing with lately? And so you write down some of these thoughts, you come up with a couple statements, and by the end of that time, you've really received a compass for the day. One thought that you're going to fix your mind on, that you're going to come back to 7, 8, maybe 10 times a day, but it's something positive. It's something that really reflects, hey, God is on my side, and if God believes in me and God loves me, then, gee, I can take on the world today. So by doing this daily switch on your brain process, Dr. Carolyn Leaf states that you take those toxic branches, because the neurons in your brain, they grow like trees. There's branches, billions upon billions of neurons growing, and we either have whole toxic branches, or we have toxic branches that are large and whole, or we have green, healthy-looking branches like a great avocado tree. So we're either growing healthy branches in our brain or toxic branches. And so by going through this process, we are wiring out the negative toxic branches, and we're wiring in good new ones. And so I really want to encourage you to pick up that book. That's one thing that we really want to do here with The Grove, is just recommend some great content, give you things to think about, give you tools to really help you be the creative person, the artist that God has designed you to be. So I hope that you'll leave me a comment. If you found this helpful, go ahead and hit the share button. We'd love to hear more from you, but I really appreciate you taking the time to listen in today. This is Joey with The Grove, and we'll talk again soon. Take care now.